mind again. Use my heart to listen in. Move me with your words so I know which way to turn. It's a dream away to feel free and falling for you. It's a risk I take if there's healing in the hurts I face. Long to feel truth, to see if it resembles you and all the wonders you bring. I feel I'm falling softly. It's a dream away to feel free and falling for you. It's a risk I take if there's healing in the hurts I face. Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? We're going to get dark and mysterious right now. This morning, well, first off, welcome back. It is so good to see your guys' faces. I mean, it was great to be able to record all these stuff and stay connected to you guys during all of COVID and be able to have an online presence. But there's something about seeing faces and connecting with you guys right here that is just awesome. You know, for a lot of us, this year probably wasn't the year we wanted. And I'm sure if we could start over, we would. But, you know, as looking back, it made me ask myself these questions, like, how do you move forward from what we just went through and what we're going through? And also, how do we learn from history, you know, because this isn't the first time that humanity has faced tragedy and just hard times. How do you learn from that? Well, I looked back on the story of Jesus, and these words have so much more weight to me now when Jesus said, "They will know that you're my disciples by the way that you love." For me, looking at Jesus and the things that he faced, even though I'm sure there's many times where he's like, "Man, I don't know if I want to hold this weight," or "I don't know if I want to face this thing." But he had this balance. He had this thing called love that helped him when his world flipped upside down and things looked chaotic. Love was his balance. Yeah, that's worth a clap. So I thank you guys so much for continuing to love those around you, because that's how we move forward. That's how we become stronger. And that is how we can manage when things feel like they're flipped upside down. Jesus found his balance in love, and I think we can this morning. You guys ready to sing a couple more? Awesome.
What fortune lies beyond the stars? Those dazzling heights too vast to climb. I got so high to fall so far, but I found heaven as love swept low. My heart beating, my soul breathing. I found my life when I laid it down. Upward falling, spirit soaring. I touched the sky when my knees hit the ground. But treasure waits within your scars. This gift of freedom gold can't buy. I got the world and sold my heart. Heaven to have me again. My heart beating, my soul breathing. I found my life when I laid it down. Upward falling, spirit soaring. I touched the sky when my knees hit the ground. When my knees hit
When the past, it comes to haunt me, it tells me what I've done. It reminds me what's gone wrong. When my sins are laid before me, my Lord, you take them on. Yes, my Lord, you take them on. So if I fall and if I fail, I will trust your mercies greater than all of this. And if I bend and if I break, I'll trust hands that hold me up greater than all my regrets. You are greater than all my regrets. You are greater than all my regrets. You are. Father, I know I break your heart when I choose my way, when I doubt your love. But you take me as I am, a child. Yeah, you whisper in my ear, let's get up and try again. Sing it out. So if I fall and if I fail, I will trust your mercy is greater than all of this. And if I bend, if I break, I trust hands that hold me up greater than all my regrets. You are greater than all my regrets. You are greater than all my regrets. You are. Sing this out, come on. Hallelujah, you were right here with me. Hallelujah, you have always been there. Hallelujah, you will never stop chasing me. You're chasing me. God, come on. Hallelujah, you were right here with me. Hallelujah, you have always been there. Hallelujah, you will never stop chasing me. You're chasing me. So if I fall and if I fail, I will trust your mercy is greater than all of this. And if I bend and if I break, I trust the hands that hold me up greater than all my regrets. Greater than all my regrets. You're greater than all my regrets. You are greater than all my regrets. You are. You've overcome this world with love and made my heart your own. And I lift my eyes and throw fear aside and sing out into the night. 'Cause even when the world caves, even when the fight comes, even when the wars wage, I'll take heart. I know you are greater, forever you're a savior. I will sing your praise with all that I am, with all that I am, Lord. Even when the fight comes, even when the wars rage, I'll take heart. I know you are greater, forever you're a Savior. I will sing your praise with all that I am, with all that I am, Lord. With all that I am, with all that I am, Lord. And I won't let the storm weather my heart. Darkness bring me down. Come on. Sing in the night, my hope alive in you. And I'll walk through the fire and not be burned. Pray in the fire, watch it turn. Jesus, today I give it all to you. Yeah, I won't let the storm weather my heart. Won't let the darkness beat me down. Sing in the night, my hope alive in you. And I'll walk through the fire and not be burned. Pray in the fire, watch it turn. Jesus, today I give it all to you. Even when the fight comes, even when the wars rage, I'll take heart. I know you are greater, forever you're a Savior. I will sing your praise with all that I am, with all that I am, Lord. With all that I am, with all that I am, Lord. Won't let the darkness beat me down. Singing tonight, my hope alive in you. Come on. And I'll walk through the fire and not be burned. Pray in the fight and watch it turn. Jesus, today I give it all to you. Let's give him praise one more time this morning. Come on. Thank you guys so much for singing with us. You may be seated.
Morning. Say, it's so nice to be welcomed that way. Thank you so much. But it's good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. We are in the series called Dream, and we're trying to talk about what dreams are. And if you're watching this online today, thank you so much for tuning in. We have a huge online constituency that's really going across not just the state and the area, but also across the country. So thank you, those of you who are tuning in. Even some England and around are still watching. Sweden, there's still a few that from our international that watch us on a regular basis. So you honor us by doing that. We do appreciate it. So today we're in the teaching, and it's called Dream. What does it mean to dream? And that's what we're talking about. You know, we've overcome, when you dream, you overcome some shattered dreams. We talked about that. We looked at Nehemiah and talked about all the things that were going on in his life. We're going to look at it again in just a minute. But how that he had to overcome his shattered reality. Things were not what he expected. There was devastation that happened. Then we looked at how we need to keep silent until God confirms a dream. Then we have to overcome dream killers. You know who they are? Those are people who criticize everything you do. And some people are just, it's their, I don't want to say it's their gift of life, but it's probably the plague of life. It's just they criticize what they don't understand the full faculties of it. I remember there's a pastor friend of mine that lived in Denver. And he built this big church, a big building, seat a couple thousand people. And one of his leaders in that denomination said, that's the greatest fiasco he's building in our denomination. And that pastor just had his feelings hurt. And we were having a conversation, and the the summary of the conversation is, well, he doesn't have the dream. Because when a dream happens, it seems like you follow your heart and you do what the dream is a part of. And if someone else's dream may not be good for you, but you should not criticize others when they desire to dream. And today we're going to talk about dreaming with integrity. So let me ask this question. As we start, how do I live my life with integrity? We look at this story of Nehemiah, we're going to examine it a little more, but how did Nehemiah preserve his integrity when it should have been so easy to compromise? How can we keep our integrity in our society today? So the first thing we probably need to find out is, what is integrity? So what is it? It's the quality of being honest. It's having strong moral principles that guide your life. But there's another definition for integrity, and it's used as being whole or undivided or completeness. We're in this building, and when it was constructed, the huge beams that are on each side, they put these beams up, and the integrity of the steel makes us feel better when the wind is blowing. When this was a hurricane shelter a couple years ago, the integrity of this building made us feel pretty good about it. It was deemed safe to 160 miles an hour, and there are many of us who gathered here, along with 175 pets. So, some of them were your husbands. That's a different story. But the integrity of the building, it's about strength. So it can be in wood, steel, glass, but the quality being strong or complete. Integrity for Nehemiah was found in this passage. Well, let me tell you the story again. The country of Israel. In 1000 AD, they ruled the world. 922, they divided. 722, the Assyrian government came in and they took over all of the northern part of Israel. 586, the Babylonians came in and they defeated Assyria, but they took over the southern kingdom. And then from 586 to 539, in 539, the Persians kind of came in and conquered the Babylonians. And the Persians had all these Jewish people and in their midst, and they said, what are you guys doing here? We were brought from our homeland. And Cyrus, king of Persia, said, I've got some of the top Jewish guys work for me, and they're in my government. One is the cupbearer. The cupbearer doesn't really mean he walked around with a cup. It's a symbolic thing. It's kind of like he's one of the strong leaders for this leader. So he's one of his top advisors, and his name was Nehemiah. He said, why are you looking so gloom? Well, we've been here for about 50 years, and I hear bad things about my homeland. We want to go back. And he said, fine. And he allowed them to go back. And the story that we're looking at is about Nehemiah going back to this devastated city and having the opportunity to rebuild the walls. But during this process of returning to Jerusalem, Nehemiah gets back on the scene, and there's this devastated walls. Everything's torn down. And he discovers that his Jewish brothers, and they've been migrating back for a while, but they're not very happy with the circumstances in Jerusalem. They're crying out because they're being mistreated. They're being exploited. By whom? Let's read the story. Now the men and their wives raised a great outcry against their fellow Jews. Some were saying, we and our sons and daughters are numerous, and in order for us to eat and stay alive, we must get grain. Others were saying, we are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our homes to get grain during the famine. Still others were saying, we have had to borrow money to pay the king's tax on our fields and vineyards. And although we are of the same flesh and blood as our fellow Jews, and though our children are as good as theirs, yet we've had to subject our sons and daughters to slavery. Some of our daughters have already been enslaved, but we are powerless because our fields and our vineyards belong to others. This is Nehemiah saying, he says, when I heard their outcry and these charges, I was very angry. I pondered them in my mind, and then I accused the nobles and officials. I told them, you are charging your own people interest? So I called together a large meeting to deal with them and said, as far as possible, we have bought back our fellow Jews who were sold to the Gentiles. But now you're selling your own people, only for them to be sold back to us. The leaders kept quiet because they could find nothing to say. So I continue. What you're doing is not right. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of God to avoid the reproach of our Gentile enemies? I and my brothers and my men are also lending the people money and grain, but let's stop charging interest. Give back to them immediately their fields, vineyards, olive groves, and houses, and also the interest you're charging them, 1% of the money, grain, new wine, and olive oil. We will give it back, they said, and we will not demand anything more from them. We will do as you say. Then I summoned the priest and made the nobles and officials take an oath to do what they had promised. Now, this is an interesting story, but it's got some great truths in it. I mean, in the desire just to survive, these Jewish families who had come back from exile had been forced not just a 1% interest rate, but huge interest rate loans. Loans that they could not repay. Some have suggested 30, 40, 50% interest. In the desire, it's amazing how they could take advantage of their own family. And the collateral for the loan, if you're a banker, you understand collateral, is their land, then their daughters, then the rest of their families. And he says what they are doing is exploiting their brothers because they can. And what they were doing is not right. Isn't it ironic? You're in exile as slaves and you come home only to be turned into slaves. And then I love the part where it says, okay, you caught us, we'll fix it, we'll give it back. They appear to be blinded by their greed, their exploitation, and they're okay to continue that until they get caught. Then it's, oh, we will do the right thing. You know, we just finished the series, Do the Next Right Thing, right? I mean, the next right thing. We just finished that. And integrity begins when we see what we should do, when we become honest with ourselves, and we do the next right thing. In Nehemiah's day, the problem was the nobility. It was the wealthy taking advantage of their poorer Jewish neighbors. It seems they were either challenged or threatened. Regardless, once their eyes were open or once they were called on the carpet, they changed. Now, I'm going to ask this question. How's your integrity? Do you do the right thing because it's the right thing, or do the right thing because I just got caught? No, this gets real personal. Do you drive the speed limit so you won't get a ticket, or you drive the speed limit because the sign's there? The answer is, I don't drive the speed limit. So you just get away with that. So it kind of takes you out of the, but is it, and people say, well, it's moral, it's morality, and trust me, rules and morality are not always the same. Because, for example, this Clark Road used to be 55 miles an hour, now they dropped it to 45. So if you go 55, it's okay one day, and the next day it's 45, and your morals change just because someone puts up a different sign. No, the laws of the land change, but sometimes some of the laws, as we know, have been created long ago, and they're church laws that have been created long ago that need to be shifted and changed and modified because it's not the right thing to do. So as we are challenged to dream, I want to share 3 principles from this story that I think will help us in our lives today. They're in your notes. You can fill in the blank if you want. Here's the first one. Focus on the work, not the perks. Nehemiah knew about the temptations of position and power. He had served 12 years as governor of Judah, which meant he was the highest official in the land. And there are lots of perks as top official in the land. But Nehemiah chose not to take advantage of his positions. I love this story. It's from England. It's high Baucom, England. When they elect a mayor, they say all the town council are brought together at every election of mayor. And following this ancient custom, everybody that's in government in that town has to get on the scales. And they're weighed. And if they weigh less or the same as they weigh when they were elected in the office, everybody applauds. And if they don't, what they look at says, you've just gotten fat off the government. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm not getting on the scales. And I don't really appreciate even thinking that. But anyways, they'd grown fat at the public expense. According to this story, it seemed like there were some pretty fat governors that had served before Nehemiah. It had been natural for him to follow in their footsteps. Why? Because any oversight was 1,000 miles away. The king is a long way away. You can get away with a lot of stuff. But as we begin to dream, and even this series, it's not about becoming a fat cat. It's a dream where God can use us to change the world. I wonder what would happen if we were to take our resources and begin to share them. I love the story of the five loaves and 2 fish. Well, you've got 5,000 people need to be fed. How do we feed that many? How much do we have? We'll go find out. And they brought back one boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And Jesus says to his disciples, you feed them. And they go, how in the world can we feed all these people with 5 loaves and 2 fish? And the miracle provision, now let me just ask, do you really think that 5,000 people could gather without any snacks at all? If you're a mom, you have snacks in your purse for your kids right now. If not, you have it for your husband. But I mean, snacks are part of life, and there's food. But what really is amazing, when 5,000 gather, they see one person start to share, and all of a sudden the entire group begins to share. And everybody has plenty, and there's lots of leftovers. See, that's the miracle of community today. Because it's not about being a fat cat, it's God used us to change the world, take our resources and multiply them. So how do people, as far as sharing, how do people in your company behave when there's no supervisor? We're talking about integrity. How do students behave when there's no teacher in the classroom? We know the answer to that. And first of all, I want to say, I'm sorry for when I was a student and the teacher went out of the room. Okay, but now I do better. But the main difference between Nehemiah and the rest of the governors was a reverence for God. Another big difference was that the precious governors never got the wall built. All the predecessors never did the work. They just simply got the resources and they used them personally. See, I think we'll begin to see great things happen when we realize that our efforts will make a difference in the world. So let me tell you a story about the Great Wall of China. In ancient China, the people wanted security against all the barbaric hordes to the north, so they built the Great Wall. And as the story goes, so high that they believed no one would ever be able to climb over it, and it was so strong, nothing could break it down. The people of China settled back after they built the wall, and for 100 years, in the first 100 years, it was invaded 3 times. And say, well, how did they get through the wall? Was it because it was not strong enough, not tall enough, not unbreachable? No, they got through the wall every time because they bribed a gatekeeper into opening the gate. See, each time the integrity of the gatekeeper was an issue. And they were bribed. The Chinese were so busy relying on walls of stone, they forgot to teach integrity to their children and their gatekeepers. Which leads us to the second thought of the day. It's this: focus on people's needs, not personal rights. See, the office of the governor not only gave Nehemiah certain perks and benefits, it gave him rights that he could demand. I love this thing. It says in Nehemiah chapter 5, listen to what it says. Furthermore, this is his perk, 150 Jews came and ate at my table, as well as those who came to us from the surrounding nations. Each day, this is what they served: 1 ox, 6 choice sheep, some poultry were prepared for me, and every 10 days an abundant supply of wine of all kinds. Despite all this, I never demanded the food allotted to the governor because the demands were heavy on these people. So every day they made these feasts for all these dignitaries, but he said, but I never took my personal rations. Of course, he had position, he had power, and Nehemiah never lost touch with the needs of the people. He was not a ruler, if you read the story, who sat in the palace or sat in the temple or sat in his comfortable settings and just pointed out everything that needed to be done. He was on the job site, sharing the work like everyone else. He never lost his focus because he refused to be involved and claimed his personal rights were violated. You see this repeatedly in the Bible. In Genesis, Joseph refused to abuse his privilege. Remember the story? He was under the Potiphar, and Potiphar said, you're in charge of everything. And his wife, Potiphar's wife, came to Joseph and said, hey, sleep with me. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. No one is greater in this house than I am. But my master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you're his wife. And I will not violate that trust. You know what that's called? Integrity. In an opening convocation at the Candler Theological School in Atlanta, the new president was sent a letter from one of the moms of one of these pastors in the church. And she said, as you do this, I think you could help them. And this is what she said: I'm convinced that the message of the seminary imprints on the mind and heart of each seminary should be, what you learn is important, the skills you perfect are important, the theology you teach and preach is important, but the most important thing is what kind of person you are. If you are not a person of integrity, none of the other will matter at all. This is to pastors. But it's not just true for those studying ministry. It's for all of us living a life of integrity. In Psalm 101, David says, I will walk with integrity within my house. The Hebrew word for integrity is tam, tam. And it really means having it all together. Integrity, as we know it today, is for soundness, moral principle, character, uprightness, honesty. Let me talk about honesty for a minute. Be honest. Tell the truth. Well, it's just easier to not tell the truth. You know how many people don't tell the truth? Too many. And even simple. Someone calls on the phone, tell them I'm not here. Right? Okay, now it gets real personal. If someone calls and say, tell them I'm not here, say, who's that on the phone? That's my wife. I'm out. Tell her I just left. But don't tell her until I left. And then she calls my cell phone. But I'm just teasing. I don't do that. But I've heard so many people do it. One of the things I try to live my life is I try to always tell the truth. Now, listen carefully. When you are aware that you want to tell the truth at all times and you blow it, admit it to yourself and say, this is not who I want to be, and start over. It's not like you're going to go back and apologize to everyone. Just talk to yourself about it. There's some internal correction that happens. During the time of the 12 Caesars, the Roman army would conduct morning inspections. And the inspecting centurion would walk by. In front of each soldier, the soldier would strike his chest with his right fist, right over his heart, and he'd hit it hard. And he'd say this word, integritas. Got it? Integrity. It really was when he was clanging his armor over his heart is the strongest piece of metal they had, and he would listen to make sure the sound was right for integrity. Later, some of the more elite ones, they changed the practice. Instead of integrity, they would hit their armor, and as they did, they would say, "Hail to the king." I mean, that's what they say. Hail to Caesar, not to their unit, not to the institution, not to this code of ideas. Their heart belonged to the king. So as we begin to dream, could I challenge you? Say, this belongs to him. I'm going to serve him. I want to be the best possible version of a human being that I can be. And I want to be the best version of me that I can be. I want to be honest. I want to tell the truth. So let me challenge you. Would you give your best efforts? Would you give your best? Would you allow him to build integrity in your life? See, when Suncoast began 22 years ago, there's lots of people who think lots of things about Suncoast. Some people say, well, it's really great to have the property and do what we need to do. Yes, but Suncoast Community Church is a 501c3. We are non-political. So we're not going to try to get into politics here. And even though outside here we're all political in some measure, we try not to bring it here. We try to say, what do you mean? We're not Republican or Democrat? No, we try not to be church political. Church politics are terrible. To where someone says, that's my seat, and you're sitting in it. You know what I mean? I always get that seat. What is that person doing there? Have them move. I want to have them thrown out. Or something like that. I had a guy tell me one time we were trying to build a building. He said, you're not listening to what I'm saying. I said, really? I was a pastor. This is decades ago. He said, I want you to know if you don't do what I say. And he was wearing a sport jacket. And he patted right there and go, what does that mean? He pulls it up and it's his checkbook. If you don't do what I say, I'm not going to pay what I need to pay. You know what I said? Are you threatening me? Yeah, pretty much. I said, maybe you ought to find another pastor. Maybe you need to find another church. So, pastor, you ever thrown anybody out of the church? Once. Did you actually throw them out? No, honestly, we're still good friends. Later, I went back to him and said, really, you can't act that way. It's not who you really are. It's not your best self. To this day, it really frustrates me when people get political or try to threaten or do those kinds of things. But at Suncoast, listen carefully, no one owns Suncoast Community Church but God. This is his place. We do what we do for him. Why? Because it's integrity, doing the right thing. Mark 8 says this, he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, if anyone's going to follow me, he must deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it. And whoever loses his life for the gospel will save it. What good is it to gain the whole world and forfeit your soul? Which leads us to the last principle today. Focus on God's favor, not man's approval. Nehemiah's prayer in verse 19 shows that this was his focus. Remember me with favor, O my God, for all I have done. Nehemiah displays humility, looking forward to God's favor. See, there's one person that I serve, and it's him. I live according to his impression on my life. I follow the teachings of Jesus, but I listen to the Spirit of God as revealed in my life. Nehemiah displays humility, looking forward to God's favor as he does the right thing. See, God, I think, would want us to be honest and truthful and be people of integrity. I don't want to waste my life, but as we dream, let's don't get distracted. Let's make sure that we do great things for God. And as we do, listen carefully, others may become critical and we may get distracted, but let's keep our focus outward to help our neighbor. Catch a dream, build a legacy, make a difference. Can I pray for you? Father, thank you for your love and grace. Thank you for the challenge of this day. There's some days that we really are the best versions of us, and other days we're not quite so good. We simply ask that you'd forgive us when we blow it and restore us to the place where our heart needs to be, close to the heart of God. Do your work in us, we pray, and we'll honor you for it by loving the world. In Christ's name, amen. Would you stand, please? I'm going to tell you a story in closing. It's about integrity. It's a story of two evil brothers, neither with integrity. They were rich, they were abusive, and they were cruel. They used their money to keep their ways hidden from the public eye. They both attended the same church, and no one knew the other side of them at church. After their pastor retired, a new one was hired, and not only could he see right through the brothers' deception, he also spoke the truth. The church started to grow in numbers. Things began to build, and a fundraising campaign came up. They wanted to build a new auditorium, but they were short of needed funds. All of a sudden, one of the brothers died. The remaining brother sought out the new pastor the day before the funeral, and he handed him a check for the amount of money he needed to finish paying for the building. He said, I'll give you this on one condition. So what that? He said, at my brother's funeral, you need to say that my brother was a saint. Can you do that? The evil brother asked. The pastor said, after a moment, yes, I can. He took the check, deposited it in the bank. The next day at the funeral, the pastor said, this guy was an evil man. He was deceitful. He cheated everyone. He abused his family. He was dishonest. He was brutal to others. Then he looked at the brother and he remembered his promise. He said, but I want you to know, compared to his brother, he was a saint. So today I want you to know I'm not a saint, but I have discovered there is a love that can transform my heart. And I want to remind you, he loves you today. So do I. God bless. Thanks for coming.